The last thing I remembered wasn't the music. It was the silence. The terrifying, absolute silence of my legs refusing to move as I lay crumpled on the scorching pavement of the Sambadrome. I remembered the blinding lights of the cameras, the gasps of 90,000 people, and the weight of the school's flag draped over me like a funeral shroud. Then, the hospital, the antiseptic smell, the itchy sheets, and the sight of my sister, Paloma, leaning over my foredrip with a strange, frantic look in her eyes. I remembered the sudden, cold fire in my veins, the struggle to breathe, and then nothing.
Boom.
Boom boom.
Boom.
The vibration of the surdo drums hit me like a physical punch. My eyes snapped open, and I gasped, my lungs drawing in the humid, salt-tossed air of a Rio night. I wasn't in a hospital bed. I was standing on the wooden rafters of the Gres Unidos do Rio rehearsal hall. "Beatriz? Are you okay?" a voice asked. It was syrupy, high-pitched, and laced with a counterfeit concern that made my skin crawl. I turned my head slowly. Paloma was standing there, holding a feathered headpiece. She looked younger. No, she looked exactly as she had 4 months before the tragedy. The envy was hidden behind a mask of sisterly devotion, but now that I had died by her hand, I could see it gleaming in her eyes like a blade in the dark. "I'm fine, Paloma," I said. My voice sounded strange to me, stronger, fuller, lacking the rasp of the dying woman I had been. "I just got dizzy for a second." "You work too hard, Irma," Paloma said, stepping closer to adjust the strap on my shoulder.
Her fingers felt like ice.
"The carnival rehearsals are just starting. You need to pace yourself if you want to be the star of the parade. Here, let me help you with your practice costume." "I can handle it myself," I said, pulling away perhaps a bit too sharply. She blinked, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second. "Of course. I just want everything to be perfect for you. You know how important the flag is to the family." I looked down at my legs. They were strong. I could feel the tension in my calves, the grip of my toes against the floor. I wasn't paralyzed. I wasn't a victim. I was back at the beginning. "The flag will be perfect," I said, looking her dead in the eye. "Because this year I know exactly what's at stake." I walked away from her, toward the edge of the rehearsal floor where the dancers were beginning to form lines. The rhythm of the drums was a roar in my ears, a heartbeat that matched my own. I had been given a second chance, and I wasn't going to spend it being the perfect sister. I was going to be a storm. The rehearsal hall was a chaotic sea of sequins, sweat, and the thunderous pulse of the bateria. As the lead Porta-Bandeira, my job was to carry the soul of the school, the flag, and dance with a grace that defied gravity. In my past life, I had been so focused on the dance that I never looked at the people guarding the perimeter. But tonight, as I spun during a practice set, I saw him. He was standing near the iron gates, a head taller than most of the crowd, wearing a black shirt with Segurana printed across the chest. Thiago Silva, the head of security. He was a man of few words, known for a stare that could quiet a riot, but as our eyes met, I felt a jolt of recognition that went beyond the present moment. In the hospital, in those final hazy hours, I remembered seeing him in the hallway, arguing with the nurses, his face etched with a guilt I hadn't understood. "Beatriz, you're losing the rhythm," the director shouted. I snapped back to the present, recovering the spin. When the music finally paused for a break, I didn't go to Paloma for water. I walked straight toward the gates. "Thiago, right?" I asked, wiping sweat from my forehead. He looked down at me, his flinty eyes softening for a fleeting second. "Yes, Dona Beatriz. Is there a problem with the crowd?" "No," I said, lowering my voice so the others wouldn't hear. "But I think there might be a problem with the equipment. I've noticed some irregularities in the dressing rooms lately." Thiago stiffened, his hand resting on his radio. "What kind of irregularities?" "Things being moved. Straps feeling frayed when they were fine the night before." I lied, testing him. I needed to know if he would listen this time. I need someone I can trust to keep an eye on the costume storage. Someone who isn't part of the inner circle. Thiago looked over my shoulder toward Paloma, who was watching us from the beverage table with a suspicious frown. He leaned in slightly, the scent of cedar and cool rain clinging to him. "I've been watching the cameras, Beatrice," Thiago said, his voice a low, gravelly whisper. "I saw something last night, someone near your locker. I didn't have enough to report it, but I didn't like the look of it." "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked. "I'm just security, and she's your sister," Thiago said, his jaw tightening. "People tend to think I'm overreaching. But if you're asking for my help, you have it. I won't let anything happen to you. Not this time. Not this time." The words hung between us, heavy with a weight he shouldn't have known about. Did he remember too? Or was it just the instinct of a man who had seen a tragedy coming and failed to stop it?
"Thank you, Thiago," I said.
"Keep your eyes open. The real dance hasn't even started yet." Every time I looked at my carnival costume, a masterpiece of silver wire, silk, and 5,000 hand-placed Swarovski crystals, I felt a phantom pain in my spine. In my past life, the harness that held the heavy frame had snapped during the final turn in front of the judges. The fall had been spectacular and devastating. "It's so beautiful, Beatrice," Paloma said, her hand hovering over the silver bodice. "We were in the private storage room 2 weeks before the parade. You look like a goddess. Everyone will forget the rest of the school and only see you. That's the goal, isn't it?" I asked, watching her reflection in the mirror. "To be unforgettable." "Of course," Paloma said, her voice dropping a pitch. "Though, the weight is a concern. Are you sure the center support is strong enough? I could take it to the seamstress tonight to have it reinforced." "No," I said firmly. "Thiago has the only key to this room now. The association decided on stricter security for the lead costumes." Paloma's face paled, then flushed a deep, angry red. "Stricter security?
"Since when?"
I'm your sister, Beatrice. I've been helping you dress since we were children. Do you really trust a common guard more than your own blood?" "It's not about trust, Paloma. It's about protocol," I said, turning to face her. "The school can't afford another accident, like the one the second-tier dancer had last year. Remember?" Her heels snapped. "That was just bad luck," Paloma snapped, her eyes darting toward the door. "I don't believe in luck anymore," I said. "I believe in cause and effect. I believe that people get exactly what they deserve in the end. Don't you?" Paloma let out a short, jagged laugh. "You've changed, Beatrice. Ever since rehearsals started, you've been cold, suspicious. It's almost like you've turned into someone else." "Maybe the person I was died," I said, a small, sharp smile touching my lips. "And the person who's left is much harder to kill." I left her standing there, fuming in the center of the room. I walked down the hall and found Thiago waiting at the end of the corridor. He didn't say anything. He simply nodded and took his post outside the door. He was the wall I never had, the silent protector who saw the truth even when I was too blind to acknowledge it. Later that night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the old photos of us. Paloma had always been the sweet one, the one who stayed in the background while I took the glory. I had felt so guilty for my success that I had given her everything, my money, my trust, my secrets. And she had used them to buy the poison that stopped my heart. "Not again," I whispered to the empty room. "This time, the curtain falls on you." A few days later, Thiago caught me as I was leaving the late-night rehearsal. The hall was empty, the echo of the drums still ringing in the rafters. He beckoned me into the security office, a small room filled with flickering monitors. "You were right to be suspicious," Thiago said. He pointed to a screen showing the hallway outside the costume room. The footage was grainy, but the timestamp was from 2 in the morning. I watched as a figure in a dark hoodie approached the door. They tried the handle, then pulled out a set of keys. They fumbled with the lock for a minute before giving up and walking away, looking frustrated. Even with the hood up, the walk was unmistakable. The slight sway of the hips, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear. "Paloma," I whispered. "She has a copy of the old master key," Thiago said. "But I changed the deadbolt 3 days ago, just as you asked." She didn't expect that. "What was she carrying?" I asked, leaning closer to the screen. Thiago zoomed in. In her hand was a small, sharp pair of industrial snips, the kind used to cut through high-tensile wire. My breath caught. She wasn't just going to fray the straps this time. She was going to ensure the entire frame collapsed. If she had gotten in, Thiago said, his voice thick with a suppressed rage, you would have fallen during the first bridge. At the speed you spin, you could have been killed. I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Thiago looked at me, his brow furrowed in confusion. What? I would have been. My career would have been dead. I corrected quickly. I looked at him, seeing the genuine concern in his eyes. Why are you helping me like this, Thiago? You're risking your job by keeping this from the board. Thiago looked away, his gaze returning to the monitors. Because I've seen her type before. And because I've spent my life watching people from the shadows, Beatrice. Most of them aren't worth the effort. But when you dance, the whole city feels a little less dark. I couldn't stand to see that extinguished. He reached out, his hand hovering near mine on the desk before he pulled it back. I'll stay in the costume room the night before the parade. I won't leave that harness for a second. No, I said, a plan forming in my mind. I want her to get in. I want her to think she succeeded. Beatrice, that's too dangerous, Thiago said, standing up. I won't let you risk your life just for a trap. She won't be cutting my harness, Thiago, I said, looking him in the eye. She'll be cutting a decoy. And you're going to help me make sure the world sees exactly what she is. The night before the carnival parade is a fever dream in Rio. The city hums with a nervous, electric energy. I arrived at the storage facility at midnight, meeting Thiago in the shadows of the loading dock. Everything is set, Thiago said, handing me a small, wireless camera. I've rigged the interior of the locker. The feed goes straight to my private server, and I've set up a secondary linked to the stadium's big screen controls. I have a friend in the tech booth at the Sambadrome who owes me a favor. And the decoy? I asked. In the locker. I spent 4 hours weakening the wire exactly the way she likes it, then covered it with a thin layer of silver paint so it looks brand new, Thiago said. The real harness is in the trunk of my car, under lock and key. We slipped into the building. The air was heavy with the smell of floor wax and the faint scent of Paloma's perfume. She had been here recently. We waited in the security booth, watching the monitors in silence. At 2:15 a.m., Paloma appeared. She looked different on camera, not like the doting sister, but like a predator. She used a heavy-duty bolt cutter to snap the security chain we had left as bait. She slipped into the costume room, her movements practiced and cold. We watched as she approached my silver harness. She didn't hesitate. She took out her snips and began to work on the primary support wire, her face twisted in a look of pure, concentrated malice. How can she do it? I whispered, my heart breaking all over again. We shared a room for 20 years. I gave her everything. Some people can't handle being the moon when their sister is the sun, Thiago said softly. He reached over and took my hand, his grip warm and solid. They'd rather have total darkness than reflect someone else's light. On the screen, Paloma finished her work. She took a small spray can of silver glitter and coated the damaged area, smoothing it over until the sabotage was invisible. She stepped back, admiring her handiwork, and for a second, she looked directly into the hidden camera. She smiled, a cold, triumphant baring of teeth. She thinks she's won, I said, a cold fury settling over me. She has no idea, Thiago replied. He walked me to the exit, the city lights reflecting in his dark eyes. Go home, Beatrice. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, you show them why you're the queen of the samba. And you? I asked. I'll be at the gates, Thiago said. Watching your back. Like always. The day of the parade was a blur of feathers, makeup, and adrenaline. The Sambadrome was a canyon of light and sound, the roar of 90,000 fans shaking the very ground beneath my feet. Behind the scenes, the atmosphere was frantic. You look breathtaking, Beatrice, Paloma cried, rushing toward me in the dressing tent. She was dressed in her own secondary dancer costume, a flurry of yellow and gold. Here, let me help you with the harness. It's so heavy. You shouldn't be straining yourself. I've got it, Paloma, I said, my voice as cold as the silver on my chest. Thiago stepped into the tent, carrying the real harness, the one Paloma hadn't touched. He looked at Paloma with a neutral, professional mask. Dona Beatriz, the association has requested a final safety check by security. I'll be fitting the harness myself today. Paloma's eyes widened, her breath hitching. Security? That's not necessary. I've always done it. Orders from the top, Miss Santos, Thiago said, his voice like iron. If you'll excuse us. He stepped between us, his massive frame blocking her view as he strapped me into the genuine, reinforced silver frame. He worked with a precision that was almost tender, making sure every buckle was tight and every wire was secure. The trap is set, Thiago whispered in my ear as he adjusted my headpiece. The video is cued. When you reach the judge's stand and perform the great spin, my friend will hit the switch. Are you ready? I asked, looking at him in the mirror. I've been waiting for this for a long time, Thiago said. We moved toward the entrance of the Sambadrome. The bateria began to play, the deep, resonant thrum of the drums that signaled our school's turn. Paloma followed close behind us, her eyes fixed on my back, waiting for the moment the weakened wires would snap. I could feel her excitement, her anticipation of my humiliation. Go, Thiago said, giving my hand a final, firm squeeze. The world is watching. I stepped onto the pavement, the heat of the spotlights hitting me like a physical force. I raised the flag, the blue and white silk of Graças Unidos do Rio, and began to dance. The weight of the flag felt like nothing. For the first time, I wasn't dancing for the judges or the crowd. I was dancing for the woman who died in that hospital bed and for the man who was standing at the gates, making sure I could finally finish my song. The Sambadrome was no longer just a stadium. It was a canyon of fire, light, and the thunderous pulse of 90,000 souls. The air was a thick soup of humidity, expensive perfume, and the sharp, metallic scent of spent fireworks. As I stepped onto the white pavement, the heat from the overhead spotlights hit me like a physical blow, but I didn't falter. I was draped in silver and blue, the heavy silk of the Graças Unidos do Rio flag resting against my shoulder like a living thing. Keep your head up, Beatriz, my partner, the Mestre Sala, whispered as he took his position beside me. Today, you aren't just dancing. You're ascending. I nodded, my eyes scanning the sea of faces in the stands. Somewhere near the gates, I knew Thiago was watching. I couldn't see him through the glare, but I felt the weight of his promise. He was the anchor that allowed me to be the storm. Behind us, the bateria erupted, a wall of sound so powerful it made the bones in my chest vibrate. We began to move. The parade was a kaleidoscope of color, but as we approached the center of the avenue, the sector of the judges, the world seemed to narrow. This was the exact spot where, in another life, the world had gone black. I could see Paloma at the edge of the formation. She was dressed in her shimmering gold scales, her face twisted into a mask of faux anticipation. She was leaning forward, her eyes locked onto the primary support wire of my harness, waiting for the moment physics would take over and snap the weakened steel. Now, Beatriz, the director shouted over the roar. The music reached a fever pitch. This was the great spin, the signature move that defined my career. I gripped the staff of the flag, tucked my chin, and began to rotate. 1 turn, 2, 3. The centrifugal force was immense, pulling at my muscles, testing the integrity of the silver frame. In my past life, this was when I heard the ping of the wire snapping. This time, there was only the smooth, silent strength of the reinforced steel Thiago had secured. Suddenly, the music didn't stop, but the giant LED screens lining the stadium flickered with a violent burst of static. The live feed of my dance was cut. A confused murmur rippled through the 90,000 spectators, a sound that grew into a shocked gasp as the screens cleared. It wasn't a close-up of my face that appeared. It was the grainy, high-definition security footage from the night before. The stadium watched in absolute, horrified silence as the video played. There was Paloma, silhouetted in the dim light of the storage room. The camera caught the glint of the industrial snips in her hand. The crowd watched as she methodically bit into the wire of the harness, her face contorted with a chilling, focused malice. Then, the final blow. The video showed her spraying the damage with silver glitter, smoothing it over with a triumphant, murderous smile. No! Paloma's shriek pierced the silence, amplified by the nearby microphones. It's a lie. That's not me. The crowd's reaction was a physical force, a deafening roar of betrayal. In Rio, the Porta-Bandeira is sacred. To sabotage the flag is to attack the heart of the city itself. The cheers for the school turned into a vengeful storm of boos and whistles directed at the girl in gold. I stopped my spin, standing tall and perfectly steady in the center of the avenue. I looked directly at Paloma, who was backed against the concrete barrier, her eyes wide with terror as the cameras in the stadium pinned her like a moth to a board. The truth is never a lie, Paloma, I said, my voice carrying through the stadium's PA system as Thiago stepped out from the shadows of the judge's booth. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked only at me for a split second, a flash of pride in his flinty eyes, before he and his team swarmed the sidelines. Paloma Santos moved slowly. Thiago shouted, his hand resting on his radio as he blocked her path of escape. She tried to bolt through the line of drummers, but the city had already judged her. The dancers parted like a closing wound, and within seconds, Thiago had her arms pinned behind her back. As he led her away in handcuffs, the silver glitter she had used to hide her crimes smeared across her cheek, marking her as a traitor in front of millions. I raised the flag one more time, higher than I ever had before. The dance continues. I cried out. The drums kicked back in with a ferocity that shook the earth, and as I resumed my spin, I knew the weight of the past had finally been lifted. The fall was over. I was finally flying. The roar of the Sambadrome during the parade was nothing compared to the absolute, earth-shaking thunder of the results ceremony. I sat in the center of the avenue with my school, surrounded by a sea of blue and white. Every time the announcer boomed a score, 10 for Unidos do Rio, the dancers around me erupted, tossing glitter and tears into the humid air. But my eyes weren't on the scoreboard. They were fixed on the gates where the security detail stood. Thiago was there, his expression unreadable to anyone else, but to me, he was the only point of stillness in a world that was spinning out of control. And the grand champion of the carnival is Unidos do Rio. The world exploded. I was hoisted onto the shoulders of the drummers, the heavy golden trophy thrust into my hands. It was cold, solid, and real. In my past life, this trophy had been stained by my blood and my sister's lies. Today it was clean. As the sun began to rise over the arches of the Sambadrome, painting the sky in bruises of purple and gold, I felt the final fragments of my old life, the hospital room, the paralyzing fear, the betrayal, dissolve into the morning mist. By the time we returned to the school's social hall for the victory party, the adrenaline had begun to fade, replaced by a deep, hollow ache in my bones. The hall was a chaotic masterpiece of celebration, beer flowing like water, the bateria playing a tireless rhythm, and the scent of victory sweat filling the air. Beatriz. A toast to the Queen, the director shouted, thrusting a cup into my hand. I smiled and drank, but my soul was searching for the shadows. I found him near the back loading dock, away from the flashing press cameras and the deafening music. Thiago was leaning against a stack of equipment crates, his black security vest finally unzipped, looking out at the city as it woke up. You should be inside, Thiago said, his voice a low, gravelly vibration that settled the humming in my nerves. They're calling your name every 5 minutes. I've had enough of people calling my name for one lifetime, I said, stepping up beside him. The cool morning breeze felt like a benediction on my skin. The police, did they give you an update? Thiago turned to me, his flinty eyes softening in a way that always made my breath catch. Paloma is being held without bail. The video was one thing, but when they searched her apartment, they found the vials. She had been stealing sedative-grade ghost medications from the clinic she worked at. The same ones found in your talk screen from before. He paused, his jaw tightening. She's not coming back, Beatriz. Not for a long, long time. I lean my head against his shoulder, a long, shaky breath escaping me. I keep waiting for the floor to fall out from under me again. I keep waiting to wake up in that hospital bed. Thiago reached out, his large, calloused hand cupping my cheek with a tenderness that brought tears to my eyes. The only place you're going to wake up is in a world where you're safe. I spent a year living in the dark, Beatriz. I watched you fall on that screen 1,000 times in my head, wishing I had been the one on that pavement instead of you. When I saw you at that first rehearsal, I thought I was losing my mind. But then you looked at me and I knew. You knew what? I whispered. I knew that I'd been given a miracle, Thiago said, his voice thick with an emotion he had clearly spent years suppressing. I've spent my life guarding gates, watching people's backs, staying in the wings. But watching you dance tonight, it wasn't just about the security or the trap. I love you, Beatriz. I think I've loved you since the first moment I saw you pick up that flag 3 years ago. I reached up, covering his hand with mine. Then stop guarding the gates, Thiago. Come inside. Not as security, as mine. When he kissed me, it wasn't the frantic, fleeting energy of the carnival. It was slow, steady, and tasted of a future that was finally, truly mine. The drums were still beating inside the hall. The city was still celebrating, but for the first time in 2 lives, I wasn't the girl in the spotlight. I was just a woman in the arms of the man who had seen through the feathers and the silver to find the heart underneath. The carnival was over, but our dance was just beginning.